My husband was in a coma after a car crash. When he finally woke up, he looked at me and whispered, "Who are you?" I sobbed, "I'm your wife." But the doctor pulled me aside and said, "There's something you need to know." Confused, I checked his phone, and found a series of messages sent the night before his accident. One message stood out, "It's done. She'll never find out." My hands shook as I realized. He had been lying to me our entire marriage. When he finally spoke again, his first words left me breathless. I, female 36, have been married to my husband, male 38, who I'll call Darren, for 10 years. We met in college in Chicago. He was funny, charming, and ambitious. We had a pretty normal life, 2 cats, a mortgage, holiday dinners with my mom, you know. I thought we were a team. I thought we were happy. And maybe we were, but now I don't know what was real and what wasn't. Darren worked in architecture. He had a lot of projects out of town. Mostly in Milwaukee, sometimes Madison. He'd leave for a few days, then come back home, tell me about whatever client nightmare he was dealing with, crash on the couch with a beer, and fall asleep watching reruns of Top Gear. Normal stuff. Until one night, I got a call that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had made pasta and was watching trashy reality TV in pajamas. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. It was the police. They told me Darren had been in a serious car accident just outside Milwaukee. He was in critical condition and had been rushed to St. Mary's Hospital. They didn't say much else. Just told me to get there as soon as I could. I don't remember the drive. I just remember my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I called my sister and cried the whole way there. Part of me thought I might get there and find out he hadn't made it. When I got to the hospital, they brought me into this little waiting room. It smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. After what felt like forever, a doctor came in. He introduced himself as Dr. Khan. He said Darren had survived, but he was in a medically induced coma because of head trauma. They were monitoring the swelling in his brain. He also had a broken leg, 2 cracked ribs, and a bunch of bruising. But it was the head injury they were most worried about. The first week was hell. I barely slept. I sat next to him and held his hand, reading old texts, showing him photos from our wedding, hoping something would reach him. Every time the machines beeped funny, I'd nearly pass out. They told me he might wake up in a few days or weeks. Or never. Then, one morning, he opened his eyes. He blinked at me. I jumped up, holding his hand, crying. "Darren? Baby, can you hear me? You're okay. I'm right here." He stared at me for a second. Then he said, in the weakest voice, "Who are you?" I swear I stopped breathing. I'm your wife," I said, almost laughing, because what else could I say? "It's me. It's Sarah." He just looked at me. Confused. Blank. He didn't even try to fake it. It was like I was a stranger to him. My stomach dropped. "Her name was Laura something," the doctor added. "She had a minor injury. She left the hospital that same night." I was silent. Everything just stopped. I couldn't speak. I couldn't cry. My ears rang. I walked back into the hospital room on autopilot and sat there next to a man who didn't remember me, while I suddenly began to wonder if I ever really knew him. Later that evening, when Darren had fallen asleep again, I remembered his phone was in a bag with his personal items. I didn't think twice. I just needed answers. I opened it. No passcode. Either he had disabled it because of the accident or never re-enabled it. I went to his messages. There were hundreds of texts. Most were from someone saved under L. I opened them. The first thing I saw, "I wish I could fall asleep next to you every night." Then, "I hate lying to her. You're the only one who understands me." Just a few more months. I'll tell her soon. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I scrolled through the thread. There were photos, her face, her legs in a hotel bed I didn't recognize, dinner dates, inside jokes, pet names. And then I saw it. A message from the night of the crash. It's done. She'll never find out. I read it 3 times. It's done. She'll never find out. I didn't even realize I was crying until my vision blurred. My husband had been cheating on me for God knows how long. And judging by the texts, he had planned to come clean. Or maybe, something worse. The phrasing was chilling. It's done. What did that even mean? Did he plan to leave me? Had they fought that night? Why was she even in the car with him? The next day, I confronted him. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of his hospital bed and asked, "Who was Laura?" He looked confused. Genuinely. I don't know. She was in the car with you, I said, showing him her messages. You were seeing her. For a long time. He stared at the phone, then looked away. I don't remember. I didn't believe him. I still don't know if I do. He said he didn't remember me, either, so maybe that was true. Or maybe it was easier to pretend. Maybe it was easier to have a clean slate than to deal with what he did. For the next few weeks, he started physical therapy. I stayed in Milwaukee in a cheap hotel, trying to figure out what the hell to do. I didn't tell our families. I didn't tell my friends. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. I hired a private investigator. That's when things got worse. I stayed in Milwaukee longer than I should have. Every day I'd go to the hospital, sit next to a man who looked like my husband but felt like a stranger, and pretend like I was okay. I'd tell him stories from our life. Trips we took. Our wedding. How we met at that pizza joint in Logan Square. But none of it stuck. He just nodded and smiled like I was a nurse reading a bedtime story. He didn't remember our first kiss. He didn't remember the little scar on my chin I got from tripping at Navy Pier. He didn't even remember the cats. It was like I was some character from a life he didn't want to live anymore. But I still wanted to believe something could be salvaged. I wanted to believe this was just the accident. The memory loss. The trauma. That maybe he'd remember me eventually and everything would make sense. Until the private investigator called. His name was Mike, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. He's been seeing her for over a year, Mike said over the phone. Her name's Laura and works in design. They met on a joint project about 14 months ago. I didn't say anything. There's more, he added. They weren't just sneaking around in hotels. They had a whole setup. An apartment. Rented under her name. He paid part of the rent, I've got bank statements. You want the address? I said yes. Even though I didn't. The next day, I drove over. It was in the 3rd Ward, a trendy, artsy part of Milwaukee. Loft-style buildings, boutiques, coffee shops. Not the kind of place Darren and I ever talked about moving to. But apparently it was perfect for them. I stood outside the building for 20 minutes before going in. The door was locked, but someone was leaving, and I slipped in behind them. The unit was on the 3rd floor. 3B. I knocked. No answer. But I could hear a dog barking inside. A little yap, probably a terrier or something. We never had a dog. The door opened a crack. A woman peeked out. Blonde hair, messy bun. No makeup. Maybe late 20s. Can I help you? She asked, cautious. I said nothing for a second. I just looked at her. You're Laura? I finally asked. She blinked. Paused. Then said, You must be Sarah. My blood ran cold. She stepped back and opened the door fully. I figured you'd show up eventually. The apartment was nice. Minimalist. Modern. Plants. Open kitchen. A framed photo of Darren and her on a beach sat on a side table. He was smiling in that way he never smiled with me anymore. There was a dog, too. A little mutt with a green collar. Its name tag said Milo. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, shaking, while she leaned on the counter like we were catching up over wine. He told me he was leaving you, she said. Said you were more like roommates. That you barely talked. That you'd both be happier apart. I laughed. It was bitter. Ugly. We were planning a trip to Italy. She blinked again. Looked away. I didn't know that. I asked her about the message. The one that said, "It's done. She'll never find out." She bit her lip. That night, we had a fight. He told me he needed to tell you. I told him I didn't want to be a secret anymore. He left angry. I didn't think he'd crash the car. I stared at her. You were the last person to see him before he went into a coma. She nodded. I left without another word. Back at the hospital, I didn't say anything to Darren. Not that night. Not the next. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. But something started gnawing at me. What if he was faking it? The memory loss. The blank stares. The confusion. It had all felt too clean. Too neat. One night, I tested it. I brought in his favorite takeout, fried rice from a tiny hole in the wall we used to go to in college. He used to order it extra spicy, always with extra peanuts. I placed it in front of him. He looked at it. What's this? He asked. I thought you might remember, I said. He hesitated. Picked up a spoon. Tried it. Chewed. Then shrugged. It's okay. A bit spicy, though. That was it. That was the moment I knew. He remembered. Maybe not everything. But something. The next day, I spoke to his neurologist privately. I asked if there was any way to know for sure if he was still experiencing memory loss, or if it could be faked. She looked uncomfortable. She said technically, yes, it could be faked. But it was hard to prove. And the brain was tricky, some people genuinely forget parts of their lives while remembering others. There was no MRI scan that could say this guy is lying. So I started watching him more carefully. I started asking weird questions. What street did we live on when we first moved in together? What's my mom's name? What's our Netflix password? He'd stumble. Give wrong answers. Or say, I don't know, sorry. But then I'd catch him humming a song we danced to at our wedding. Or using the same nickname he gave our cat. Little slip-ups. Then, 3 days later, he said something that blew the whole thing open. I was helping him brush his hair, he still couldn't lift his arm properly. I made a dumb joke, something about him finally letting me cut it short like I always wanted. And he said, without thinking, you said that last time, too. I froze. Last time? I repeated. He blinked. Realized what he said. His whole face changed. I mean, maybe I remembered something, he said quickly. But it was too late. I stood up. Walked to the window. My hands were shaking again. Not with sadness this time, with rage. He remembered. He had been lying the whole time. After Darren slipped up and said, you said that last time, too, I didn't say anything right away. I just left the room. Told the nurse I wasn't feeling well. Got in my car. Sat in the parking lot with the engine running for 45 minutes. My chest was tight. My fingers kept clenching. Every single memory we had, every laugh, every argument, every Sunday morning in bed, all of it ran through my head like a movie reel on fire. He remembered. He'd known who I was this whole time. And he pretended not to. Why? I didn't go back to the hospital that night. I didn't answer his texts the next morning. Yes, he texted me. The man who couldn't remember how to use a fork a week ago suddenly knew how to unlock his phone and send messages. I called Mike again, the private investigator. You want the truth, right? He said. Of course. Then there's something I didn't tell you the first time. I waited. Your husband has a second bank account, he said. One you're not on. It's in Wisconsin. Small credit union, tied to a P.O. box. I couldn't access the details legally, but from what I can see, regular deposits were going in. Around $2,000 a month. I blinked. Why would he need a second account? Mike hesitated. I don't think it was for Laura. Now I was confused. What do you mean? Laura wasn't the only woman, he said. I've got a name. A woman in Racine. She has a 6-year-old son. Guess who's been making monthly payments to her since 2017? I felt like I was going to be sick. I drove to Racine 2 days later. Didn't even call Mike again. I needed to see it for myself. The woman's name was Maya. Lived in a modest duplex near the lake. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, but not scared. She had warm eyes. Tired. Like someone who's seen too much. You're Sarah, she said, like it wasn't even a question. I just nodded. He said you'd never find me, she added. I asked her flat out. Did he father your son? She looked me straight in the eye. Yes. I sat down on her porch. My knees couldn't take it. My head felt like it was full of bees. He told me he couldn't leave you, she went on. Said you were fragile. That you'd fall apart. I told him I didn't want to be a homewrecker, I just wanted him to be a father. So we agreed, no drama, just support. I could barely get the words out. He never told me. She shook her head. Of course not. He said he'd wait until the boy was older. Said he was going to come clean eventually. I don't know how long I sat there. Everything was spinning. Darren hadn't just cheated with one woman. He had a child. A whole other life. Maybe even more I hadn't found yet. Later that night, I finally went back to the hospital. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood at the foot of his bed and waited for him to look up. He smiled when he saw me. Like nothing was wrong. Feeling better? He asked. I just said, you've got a son in Racine. His face dropped. Silence. Then, you went there? That was his first question. Not, are they okay? Not, how did you find out? Not, I'm sorry. Just, you went there? That was when I knew he wasn't sorry. He was just sorry I found out. Why? I asked. Why fake the memory loss? He looked away. Shrugged. I didn't know what else to do. You were already here. You looked so sad. I figured, maybe it was a chance to reset things. Maybe you'd just forgive me if I was starting from zero. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the dumbest, most cowardly thing I'd ever heard. You've been lying to me for years, Darren, I said. And you're still lying. He didn't answer. I turned to leave, and he called out, there's more. I stopped. He looked at me. And in the quietest voice, said, Laura's pregnant. When Darren said, Laura's pregnant, I felt something inside me break. Not like a snap. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. Like the quiet cracking of glass before it shatters. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching him like he was some stranger I'd passed on the street and accidentally locked eyes with. You've got a son in Racine, I said slowly, like I was talking to a child. You've got a pregnant girlfriend in Milwaukee. And you've got me sitting here like an idiot, spoon-feeding you applesauce and waiting for your memory to come back. He looked away again. That same stupid habit he always had when he got caught. As if looking at the wall could erase what he did. I didn't know what else to do, he said. I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I laughed. Loud. Too loud. A nurse peeked through the door and saw us, frozen in this absurd scene of lies and pity and a man hooked up to machines pretending to be a victim. You didn't want to hurt me? I snapped. You could have divorced me. You could have told me the truth at any time. Instead, you decided to cheat, build a second life, make a third baby, and then fake amnesia when your lies crashed into each other. Literally. He didn't respond. So I walked up, stood next to his bed, and threw the phone on his lap. Guess who else knows? I said. Laura. Maya. Mike. My sister. The nurses. Dr. Khan. Everyone. You're not a mystery anymore. You're just a liar who got caught. That got his attention. His head snapped toward me. You told Laura? He asked. I just stared. Yes. And she cried. She actually cried for me. Because at least she knew she was the other woman. I didn't even get that. Silence again. What do you want from me? He asked finally. I didn't know the answer until he said it out loud. Then it hit me all at once. I want you to be sorry, I whispered. I want you to say it like you mean it. I want you to feel even half the shame I've been dragging around since the accident. I want you to tell the truth, not just to me, but to them. To everyone. That night, I left the hospital for the last time. I went home to Chicago, to the house that felt more like a crime scene than a home. My sister, Rachel, came over the next day. She listened quietly as I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. Didn't gasp. When I finished, she just hugged me and said, "He's a coward." But you're not. The next week, Darren was discharged. He texted me, asking if we could talk. I said no. Then I got a call from Laura. He told me you lied, she said. Said you made up the baby in Racine. Said you're trying to destroy him. I told her everything. I sent screenshots. She didn't reply for 2 days. Then she posted everything on Facebook. The pictures. The texts. The messages from the Racine woman. She tagged Darren. Tagged me. Tagged the architecture firm he worked for. It exploded. Clients pulled projects. His firm placed him on leave for personal reasons. Friends started texting me, some to offer support, others pretending they always knew something was off. I didn't care. Let it burn. The only message I replied to was from Maya. The Racine woman. She said, I told my son the truth today. He asked me why his dad doesn't visit. I told him his dad is sick. Not in the body. In the soul. Weeks passed. One day, Darren showed up at our house unannounced. I opened the door, stared at him. He looked terrible. Pale. Slumped. Like someone who had finally been dragged to the bottom of his own lies. You were right, he said. About everything. I said nothing. I loved you, he added. I got scared. And stupid. And then I got stuck. And I kept digging. I didn't know what I wanted from that moment. Maybe I thought it would feel better, hearing him say it. But it didn't. I don't hate you, I said. But I don't love you anymore either. And that's what's worse. He nodded. I'll sign whatever you send, he said. No fight. I filed for divorce that week. Quietly. No lawyers. No drama. Months have passed now. Laura moved to Madison. Maya keeps in touch. Rachel visits often. I got a therapist. I started yoga. I sleep with the windows open. I stopped checking his social media. I don't think I'll ever understand why he did what he did. Why he broke so many hearts with a smile on his face. Maybe he doesn't understand either. But here's what I know, love isn't enough without honesty. Loyalty isn't real if it disappears behind closed doors. And sometimes, the worst heartbreak doesn't come from being left, it comes from staying too long. I'm not whole yet. I still cry sometimes. I still look at old pictures and wonder what I missed. But I'm not broken either. I'm just free. And that's a start.